shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin. The things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
From the shadows beyond the campfire to the things waiting just outside the beam of a flashlight. This is the Shadow Frequency. I'm Matt Wilson.
And I'm Juniper Ravenwood, once again opening the file cabinet, which somehow gets worse every night. All right. Okay, hold on. Why are there hula hoop bags in here?
Oh, those are from Chris.
Well, why doesn't he throw them away?
I've learned not to ask questions I don't want answered.
All right, next item. Looks like a manila folder containing nothing but a strong smell of cigarette smoke.
That's unsettling.
Very, because there's nothing inside it. No papers, no notes, no photos. Just that smell like somebody closed it up in the middle of a bad decision.
Or like whatever belonged in that folder burned up and left the memory behind.
See, that is exactly the kind of sentence that makes me want to shut this drawer and walk away. All right. Oh, wait. Here it is. Tonight's file. Here you go, Matt.
Oh, cool. Episode 300, The Mojave Incident.
A quiet camping trip in the desert, strange lights in the sky, missing time, unseen entities, and the kind of close encounter story that doesn't just end when the night is over.
And before we go any further, we should probably stop and appreciate something here. We just passed our 1-year anniversary with the Shadow Frequency, and tonight we hit episode 300.
Which is honestly kind of amazing and a little suspicious considering how much cursed material we've pulled out of this cabinet in that time.
That's true. 300 episodes of strange cases, haunted stories, UFO encounters, conspiracies, listener mail, and things we probably should have left alone.
So whether you've been with us since the beginning or just found your way into the dark with us recently, thank you for being here.
And for episode 300, it feels fitting that we head into one of the most disturbing alien encounter cases ever reported from the American desert.
Because when the Mojave gets quiet at night, it feels like the whole world is holding its breath and maybe waiting for something to come down out of the sky.
This is episode 300, The Mojave Incident.
You are tuned to the Shadow Frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson. Produced by Juniper Ravenwood. With Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Out in the Mojave, the night sky is supposed to feel endless, beautiful, even peaceful. But every now and then, a place that looks empty starts to feel like it's watching you back. Tonight's file is about a camping trip from 1989 that should have been nothing more than a quiet weekend under the stars, and instead became one of the most disturbing alleged alien abduction stories in modern UFO lore. A couple heads into the desert for solitude, sees lights moving in impossible formations overhead, and before the night is over, they're dealing with missing time, terrifying entities, strange marks, and memories that would only get worse the more they tried to understand them.
Yeah. This is one of those cases that starts off with, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then just keeps sliding deeper into the kind of nightmare you really wish had stopped about 10 minutes earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Desert, darkness, red lights, little figures outside the camper. That is already bad enough.
Yeah.
But when you add in the missing hours and what they later said happened aboard the craft, that's where this one really gets under your skin.
Exactly. This one doesn't feel flashy. It feels invasive, feels close. And that's what makes it so creepy. So go ahead, Matt, crack open the file on the Mojave Incident.
Well, first of all, Juniper, thank you for digging into the file cabinet and pulling out tonight's case, because this one has that exact flavor of late-night dread the shadow frequency was built for. The Mojave incident is one of those stories that hangs around UFO culture because it doesn't just give you strange lights in the sky and leave it there. It starts with wonder, then turns threatening, then turns deeply personal. Public retellings center on Steve and Dawn Hess, a married couple whose account was later featured in Ron Felber's Mojave incident, discussed on Coast to Coast AM and dramatized in Sci-Fi's Paranormal Witness as the Mojave Encounter. According to those retellings, this all goes down in October of 1989. Steve and Dawn head out to the Mojave for what is described in some versions as a quiet camping getaway, and in another public retelling as part of a hunting trip. Either way, the mood at the beginning is the same. They're looking to get away from noise, pressure, people, all of it. Just a couple of adults leaving the kids with family, borrowing a camper, heading into a place where the world is supposed to get very still. And that detail matters because when the desert goes silent in a story like this, it never feels comforting. It feels like a warning. One version says they arrived to find Mid Hills Campground full, so they settled in a quieter, more isolated spot a little off the beaten path. That is such a small decision, but it changes the whole emotional temperature of the story. They're no longer among other campers. No easy reassurance, no crowd, no witness standing 10 feet away saying, "Hey, I saw it too." Just dark land, open sky, and the sense that if something bizarre happens out there, help is going to feel very far away. Sci-Fi's recap says they were delighted with the isolated spot at first. That's the part I always come back to because the place they chose for peace becomes, in their telling, the perfect trap. Then the lights appear. Steve later recalled seeing a bright white light rise over a mountain and disappear. Right after that, the public versions say 9 lights appeared overhead in an M formation, flashing as if they were somehow communicating with one another. Sci-Fi's recap similarly describes several bright lights forming that shape in the sky while smaller red lights began descending from the larger ones, gliding downward as if they were coming to the ground in stages. That image alone is creepy enough. Not one object, not one flash, but a pattern, a deliberate arrangement. Something structured, something controlled, something that doesn't feel random at all. And then the story drops from the sky to the ground. The Hesses said those red lights came lower and lower until what had looked distant began to feel immediate. In the Sci-Fi recap, the advancing red lights are described as becoming visible on the headpieces of impish elf-like beings moving toward the camper. That is where the case stops sounding like a distant UFO sighting and starts becoming a siege. They are no longer just watching something overhead. Now something is approaching them. Something small. Something fast. Something with glowing red eyes in the dark. And if you're sitting in a camper in the middle of nowhere, there is really no comfortable way to process that. So Steve and Dawn retreat into the camper. That's the instinct anybody would have. Get inside. Shut the door. Put a wall between yourself and whatever is out there. But the camper doesn't become protection in this story. It becomes the box they're trapped inside while the encounter tightens around them. Public retellings say they heard a low mechanical or hydraulic hum. Then came a blinding or intense red light from above. Then the camper began to shake violently. Then a suffocating mist started pouring in. That combination is just awful. The noise, the shaking, the glow overhead, the air itself becoming hostile. It turns the inside of that camper from shelter into a chamber. Some published summaries of the case also include something even more disturbing. The claim that the entities were not just physically present, but mentally invasive. Felber's publisher summary says the couple described their captors as manipulating their minds with telepathic power, while later retellings frame the experience as a psychological torment as much as physical fear. That's one reason this case has stuck with people. It doesn't just play as something strange was seen, It plays as something got in, into the camper, into the body, maybe even into the mind. And then blackout. That's one of the hardest edges in the whole account. After the shaking, the mist, and the terror, the next thing the public versions say is that they wake up the following morning in the camper, holding on to each other, shielding their eyes from daylight. The radio newscast, according to Sci-Fi's recap, had nothing unusual to report. No public emergency, no explanation, no shared event suddenly making the whole thing easier to understand. Just sunlight, confusion, exhaustion, and the realization that however long the night had felt, something in it was missing. Something had been cut out. And then comes that nasty little physical detail that keeps the case from settling down. Dawn reportedly noticed 2 small red dots on the side of her neck like puncture marks. Again, not proof in any hard scientific sense, but in terms of storytelling, atmosphere, and witness experience, it is exactly the kind of thing that makes a person spiral. Because now the night isn't just a memory problem. Now there's something on the body. Something visible, something that says maybe whatever happened out there didn't stay out there. And for Steve and Dawn, the desert was no longer peaceful. By the time that sun came up, it had become the place where normal life cracked open. And once you've got missing time, body marks, and a night that seems to have been edited right out of your life, that's when a case stops being weird and starts becoming personal.
Yeah. And that's the part that really gets me, the idea that the scariest part may not be what they remembered, but what they couldn't.
Exactly. And in the second half, we're getting into what happened after they left the desert, because according to this story, the Mojave didn't stay behind them. Juniper, take us to the break.
So far, we've got an isolated campsite, impossible lights, red-eyed figures, a humming overhead presence, and a couple waking up with hours apparently gone. If you're listening right now, you're probably either leaning way in or very scarcely rethinking ever camping in the desert again. And the really unsettling part? We're not even at the aftermath yet, because next this case starts moving from one terrifying night into something that seems to echo back home, into memory, into family life, and into those regression sessions that turn this from a close encounter story into a full-blown abduction lore. Let's hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Juniper. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, one of the biggest things you can do for us is follow and subscribe wherever you're listening right now. That helps the podcast tremendously with visibility. Be sure to find us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and across all the major podcast platforms. And don't forget our home base at shadowfrequencypodcast.com, where you'll find full episodes, the companion blog, merch in the store, show notes, and ways to reach out by email or voice message. You can even buy us a coffee to help keep things going. All right, let's hand it back over to Juniper.
All right, time to fire up the spectral cosmic message materializer, flipping the switches. Let's see what the old haunted contraption coughs up tonight. Oh, there it is, fluttering out through the static like a half-burned postcard from beyond.
Message retrieved from the void.
Let's unfold this eerie little message and see what our listener said drifting our way. This one says, "Hey Matt, Juniper, and Chris, this is David from Florida. I'm retired, so I've got plenty of time to listen, and I usually put on the Shadow Frequency during my afternoon walks. I listen on Pandora, really enjoy the blog, and I love all the different topics you cover. Just wanted to say, keep up the great work, David from Florida." Well, David from Florida, that's awesome. First of all, thank you for taking us along on those afternoon walks. There is something very cool about imagining Shadow Frequency out there in the sunshine while you're strolling around Florida, listening to us talk about red-eyed beings in the Mojave. Also, huge thanks for reading the blog, too. We put a lot into covering a wide mix of strange topics, so hearing that you enjoy the variety really means a lot. And of course, if you want to send us your own strange little note from the other side of the internet, email us at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. We always love hearing where you listen, what episodes creep you out the most, and what weird corners of the paranormal you want us to open next. All right, let's hand it back over to Matt for the second half.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper and David. Thank you for the kind note. We appreciate you, and I kind of love the image of this show being part of somebody's afternoon ritual while the rest of us are down here talking about desert terror and missing time. So let's get back into the Mojave incident, because the reason this case stayed alive is not just what Steve and Dawn Hess said happened that night, it's what came after. According to Sci-Fi's recap, they left the desert fast, asked another camping couple whether they had seen or heard anything strange, and got nothing back that helped. No confirmation, no shared witness, just silence. And then they went home and tried to keep living, but the night didn't seem willing to stay in the past. The public retellings say they remained haunted by those missing hours, and one especially unnerving detail is the account involving their son, who reportedly woke one night to the sound of that same low hum and flashing red lights, later saying, "Don't let those little guys with the red eyes get me." That it followed them home element is one reason this story hits so hard. A lot of close encounter stories are scary in the moment, but they still feel boxed into one place, one road, one night. This one leaks. It stains the days after. Felber's publisher's description leans hard into that idea too, saying the nightmare was not over even after the couple was alone again. Whether you take that as literal alien harassment, psychological fallout, or some combination of both, the emotional reality in the retellings is the same. They did not walk away from this feeling like they'd simply seen something odd in the sky. They felt acted upon, changed by it. Then comes the part of the story that really locked it into abduction lore, regression therapy. Sci-Fi's recap says Steve confided in a friend, which eventually led to contact with an author working on trauma-related material, and then to Dr. Annixter, who specialized in regression therapy. The couple were reportedly hypnotized individually, and those sessions are where the story opens up into the more familiar architecture of the alien abduction narrative. A large craft, examination tables, immobilization, invasive procedures, and a more prolonged captivity than the waking memory alone seemed to allow. According to the Telefi's recap, both described being taken aboard a large spacecraft and forced to endure painful experiments. Dawn's recollections were described as especially harrowing, including being subdued or drugged by a strange device that the retelling connects to 2 marks on their neck. The same public version even folds in a pregnancy detail, presenting the event as not just frightening, but intimate and violating in a way that many abduction stories used to become unforgettable. And that's the word for the case, really violating. It is not remembered in UFO culture as a glamorous saucer story. It is remembered as psychological terror. Now, here's the one measured skeptical beat I want to give you. Not to flatten the story, but to keep our footing. Hypnotic regression is controversial. Modern reviews note that hypnosis used for autobiographical recall can increase confidence in memories without making them more reliable, and researchers have warned that memories recovered through hypnosis need corroboration from other evidence before they're accepted as true. In other words, regression can feel deeply revealing and still leave the open question of what is memory, what is suggestion, and what may have been shaped afterward. That does not prove Steve and Dawn fabricated anything. It simply means the most extraordinary parts of the case sit on a form of evidence that remains heavily debated. And honestly, that tension is part of why the Mojave case stays interesting, because even when you set aside the question of literal extraterrestrials for a second, you are still left with something unsettling. Public retellings from Felber, Coast to Coast AM, and Paranormal Witness all agree on the broad emotional arc: a couple in the desert, structured lights overhead, smaller red lights descending, terror in the camper, lost time, marks on the body, and a lingering aftermath that didn't feel easy or theatrical. Even the basic public summaries aren't perfectly identical. For example, one version frames the trip as a camping getaway while another calls it a hunting trip. And that reminds you that we are hearing the event through layers of retelling. But the core nightmare remains remarkably consistent. The case also endured because it was packaged in the media that gave it a second life. Felber's book helped formalize the narrative, with the publisher summary describing 9 glowing objects over the Mojave on October 21st, 1989, telepathic manipulation, and watchers tormenting the couple for a day and a night. Then, the story was carried into broader paranormal pulp culture through the February 13, 2016 Coast to Coast AM show, and Sci-Fi's Paranormal Witness episode, The Mojave Encounter, which aired on October 19, 2016. So when people bring up the Mojave incident now, they're usually not talking about a newspaper file from 1989. They're talking about a case that lived on because the witnesses kept telling it and media kept reshaping it for new audiences. And maybe that's the real power of this story. Not that it gives us laboratory-grade proof. It doesn't. It gives us something messier and more human. Fear, memory gaps, body marks, dread, and the sense that an ordinary life got interrupted by something it could never fully explain. Out in the Mojave, Steve and Dawn Hess said they encountered lights that became entities, entities that became control, and control that became missing time. Maybe that was a literal non-human abduction. Maybe it was some other extreme experience filtered through trauma and later interpretation. But either way, the terror they described has outlived the night itself, and that is why this file never really closes. Because at the end of the day, the scariest possibility may not be that they saw something impossible. It may be that something impossible saw them first.
Yeah, that one's sticking with me. The desert is already eerie enough without adding red-eyed visitors and missing hours.
Absolutely. Whatever happened out there in the Mojave, it left behind the kind of story that still feels wrong when you sit with it too long. Juniper, let's close it down.
That was episode 300, The Mojave Incident, a case of strange lights, missing time, terrifying entities, and memories that always seemed to grow darker the more they were examined. Thanks for spending part of your night with us here on the Shadow Frequency. We always appreciate you listening, whether you're at home in the dark, out on the road, or maybe just side-eyeing the sky a little more than usual after tonight's episode. And don't forget, you can email us anytime at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Tell us where you listen, what topics you want us to cover, or send in your own strange stories. And you can find our website, shadowfrequencypodcast.com. And be sure to follow along on all the usual haunts. We'll be back soon with another strange case from the shadows. Matt, you want to say goodnight?
Good night, everybody. And if you ever head into the desert for a quiet weekend, maybe don't look up for too long.
Good night from all of us at the Shadow Frequency. Stay curious and stay out of the dark.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and